I'm Don. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I have a husband, Robert, who's currently in Amsterdam, but he'll be back next week. And I have 2 children, Carmen and James. Carmen is 7 and James is 4.
My name is Margaret Pucci, and this is my partner of 20 years, Betty Piazza. We have a daughter, a son, and 2 grandsons. Many nieces and nephews, and 5 cats.
I'm Daniel Chesser-Turan, and this is my partner and husband,
Ian Chesser-Turan.
And we've been together for 11 years now, and we've been married for 9 years.
And we live in South Orange, New Jersey, in the United States. And
we're the proud parents of 3 beautiful children. Our oldest son is Eliezer, and he's 4.5 years old. And then we have a son named Yona, who is 2.5 years old. And
Tamar is 7 months old.
Our newest addition. She's very cute.
My name is Flora. I'm Luz's wife, and we have 2 children together. Kevin and Kendrick, ages 13 and 11. And Luz.
All right, I'm Joseph Hayden. I'm Alexandra's father.
And I'm Josh Weissar, and I'm Joseph's partner, and we're living in Brooklyn, New York.
Robert and I were legally married in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, it became legal almost 2 years ago for same-sex couples to get a marriage license from the state of Massachusetts. And so we did do that. We were actually the first gay male couple married in the state. There was a lesbian couple that got married before we were, so we weren't first married couple, same-sex couple, we were the first married gay male couple.
Well, so when we got married, we were actually living in New York, but you can't get married anywhere in the States other than in Massachusetts. We do have a civil union in New Jersey and also domestic partnership from New York City. But we got married in a religious ceremony. So even though the state doesn't recognize our marriage, we, before God and our community, we're married. And as a religious institution, it works for us. So we consider ourselves married.
In terms of when did I want to have a child, it was really from the very beginning. I remember very early on, I always wanted to be a parent. I always wanted to be a dad. I think it is true. I think there are some people that right from early on they want to be a parent, and some people choose not to. And, it's something that, and maybe I'm sure some people discover later in life that's what they want to do. But for me, it was very early on. I don't even think I was a teenager when I knew that at some point I wanted to have a child. And I remember that with my mom in particular, she had a very difficult time when I first came out to her, because she said, "You're never going to get married, you're never going to have children," and I was like, "Yes, I am." and so I think my mom was really impressed that I was right in the end.
I did not think about having children. I didn't want children. I'm not a huge fan of children. I mean, I love Alexandra, and I think I love Joe even more because of Alexandra. But I did not plan on being in a relationship with someone who had a child, or didn't plan on having children.
But we were a package deal, so...
But, I'm delightfully surprised that, I ended up in this situation, and I'm very happy. But I never planned it that way. I didn't plan it. I didn't think it was going to be that way, and it never crossed my mind that it would be this way. But like I said, when I heard her call him Dad, it just did something to me.
I think we each have different stories. So I always knew that I wanted to have kids, and then when I came out and realized that I was gay, I thought that meant that I probably couldn't. But pretty quickly, I came to the decision that I would want to anyway, before I met Ian. And so that was a prerequisite if I was going to meet somebody and commit to them for life, that they would have to be interested in that as well. But I think Ian's evolution to parenthood was a little different.
And I don't think I gave as much thought to it until after I met Daniel, and then after I met Daniel, we talked about it, and Daniel told me that that was something that was important for him, and that was fine with me also, and so we decided that we were going to move forward to have children.
After our wedding, if you will, there was a year after that we pursued having an adoption. And in Massachusetts, it was legal 8 years ago for same-sex couples to adopt as a couple. And so we adopted as a male couple our first child, Carmen, right from the very beginning. In the United States, unlike I think in most of Europe and most other countries, same-sex couples can adopt but not marry. And I think in Europe it was much more common for it to be the other way around. I think initially in the Netherlands, people could have marriage rights or something similar to marriage rights, but they couldn't adopt. And then it was much more recent that they were able to get full marriage rights and also to be able to adopt as a couple. But in the U.S., same-sex couples have been able to adopt for, as a couple, it's been almost 10 years. In terms of what were the rights prior to having our marriage recognized, it was actually kind of frustrating because we were both Carmen's parents. We just had no legal relation to each other. And so when we were also active in trying to secure marriage rights for same-sex couples in Massachusetts, and it always seemed very strange that the state would want a same-sex couple to adopt and to be parents of a child, but then not have any legal relationship between the two parents. And so it was always very funny to me that Carmen was my next of kin, but not Robert. Up until our marriage license, Robert was not considered my next of kin. It's very strange to feel that you have a spouse and you have a common child together, and that you're married and you had a wedding, but really up until 2 years ago, we never had any of the rights that joined us together as a couple.
Anthony, I had biologically, and he and Betty have been together since he was 2 years old.
We decided that we wanted to adopt instead of any other options, in part because we weren't comfortable, or I in particular was not comfortable with the idea of surrogacy, which is the way a lot of other people go for it. But I'm a big control freak, and I think the two of us wanted to have a lot of control over what was going on with our children. And so to co-parent with a lesbian couple or someone else who would become also active parents wasn't going to work for us. We wanted to be the parents. And legally, I was very nervous about our legal status and the amount of control we would have if a surrogate changed her mind, for example. And adoption is not 100% secure either. A birth parent can change their mind before it's finalized as well, but at a certain point you have finalization and then it's secure and stable. And so that seemed to be the route that made the most sense for us. We also, we had considered very briefly international adoption. So people would adopt babies from China or from other parts of the world. And what we had found out is that we would be able to do that as a single parent, but we would have to pretend that we weren't a couple. And we would have to sort of go back into the closet. And we knew a lot of people who did that, but it didn't work for us. It was very important for us to start our family very honestly as a gay family, in a way that would be celebrated. And so that was an important part of our decision to move forward in that direction.
I think my family supported me because they knew that being a father is what I am first. I'm a gay man second. And I think they knew that I have a passion about being a good father, and it's just something that I think my father raised me to be. So they were supportive, especially under the circumstances, because they knew that I was providing my daughter with a stable home, and I've always been there. So my family has been very loyal, even if they did not like, perhaps, the fact that I'm gay. But it's not something that they realize will change, so they've been supportive regardless.
Our relationships with our families, I would say, have evolved in unique and interesting ways, and each of our families are very, very different. So you want to start with your family?
Sure. When I first came out to my parents, when I was still in college and I was 20, my father's reaction was, "Oh, I don't want to bury my son," because he had all sorts of terrible fears about AIDS. And my mother's reaction was, "Oh, I always knew, I always knew." And they at first had a very difficult time adjusting, right? But over time, I think that they've come a very long way to the point where now they're completely accepting of our family, and especially since we've had children, they've grown to be completely accepting of our children. Even before that, when we got married, they were very involved. They wanted to be very involved, and they grew to love Daniel, and they grew to know that we were a family like any other family. And I think that's where things are now.
My impression of Ian's side of our family is that they have more issues with us over us being religious than over us being gay. And that's the bigger issue. And it's with my family, it's the opposite. They have more issues over us not being religious enough, but not so much over us being gay now. But they also definitely evolved. I grew up in a very observant Orthodox Jewish family, and so when I came out to my parents, I came out after I was already living on my own. I finished college. I wanted to wait till I wasn't financially dependent on them anymore. And they've always been a very loving, warm family, but they had a very hard time dealing with my coming out. And their claim was that it dealt a lot more with my leaving their religion or their religious views than it did with my being gay per se, but obviously it was hard for them to separate those two things. Once Ian came into my life, they were very, I think, welcoming and respectful of him, but sort of at a distance. There wasn't the same kind of embrace and excitement that they had for my brothers-in-law when they came, and certainly there wasn't this communal celebration and shouting it from the rooftops that their daughter was hitched and found this great guy. So Ian was a little bit of an embarrassment to them. That he was a really nice guy, so it wasn't such a horrible embarrassment, but I think that it was difficult for them. My sisters would always sleep over at my parents' home with their children and their families, and celebrating the Sabbath in my family was a huge thing, and so the way you would spend time together as a family is be at each other's house for the Sabbath, which means sleeping over. But Ian and I were not allowed to sleep over together, or he would be welcome, but we couldn't sleep in the same room, which didn't work for us. But we sort of let that go. We would still be with them. We would visit, for, a day. We would do things until
we had children.
Until we had children. And then we said we had to draw the line because we didn't want to give those double messages to our children. And so when Ellie was born, we said, look, this has to stop. Either we're welcome in your home and we're going to spend Shabbos and we're going to do all of these things, or we're not. And there were a couple of months that were very tense. And then my father called and said, you know what, we just really want you with us, and so come for Shabbos. And we did, and it really felt like that was like a switch. And then after that, I think they realized the sky didn't fall, and it felt, partly because of Ellie, partly because people didn't, shun them. It seems as though it was much easier for them to be welcoming and accepting of us. And really now, I think with both of us, the biggest issues we have with our families are that my family thinks we're not religious enough, and his family thinks we're like religious nuts.
I think my parents know that we have our own way of doing things, and I think that they respect that for the most part.
Okay.
Although also...
That's my turn.
Well, I should say also though, when the children are with them, then they do, a lot of things.
They have a very hard time respecting our boundaries.
They do.
They've gotten much better. It's true.
When they're here and when they're with us, they know that our rules really.
That's not why I was laughing though. They like to give advice a lot.
Oh.
They've learned that we don't necessarily take it, and that we want to do things our own way, but that's an issue for them. But my parents live very far away, so it makes it much easier.
There was certainly a question when we were first deciding to have kids in terms of what, and I think any same-sex couple goes through this, what are your children going to call you? And I think each family just decides it on their own. we had read a book that said that gee, you should be aware that one of the things that's common for same-sex couples to do is to say like mom or dad and your first name. So like, Daddy Don and Daddy Robert for us. And they said, certainly feel free to do that, but recognize that when your children do that, they're going to be coming out. They're going to be basically, if you're out in public and your child refers to you as Daddy Don or Daddy Robert, that is an act of coming out in society, and that, your child may not be comfortable with that. And we gave that some time thinking about it, and we decided the world's spinning forward, and no one really is going to care. And anyone who sees our family, I mean, we're two white men with two black children, I think they're going to know we're kind of, a gay couple with two kids. I mean, it's just, you can't look at us and not know that.
The children call me Daddy, and they call Daniel Abba, which is Hebrew for Daddy.
Well, we were at his brother's wedding last weekend, and we met a very nice woman from a very small town in Oregon, and she very tepidly said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Okay." She says, "Well, I don't want to ask it really because you'll get offended, maybe."
And that's when I knew exactly what she
we
was going
both
to ask.
knew exactly what she was going to ask, which was the man and which was the woman. I think lesbians are also asked that question very often, and again, it depends on how gender specific you think certain things are. I don't know if there's any reason to answer those questions, because you're answering a very heterosexist question. Not everything is done in the male-female perspective.
So one of the questions that certainly came up for us is how to divide up the roles, because even though for heterosexual couples, modern heterosexual couples, there certainly is the notion that there's an even division of labor, but I still think women, probably certainly in the U.S. are still much more acculturated to being the primary caregiver. Sometimes it's purely physical, especially if a mom has chosen to breastfeed, she's going to be up at night. That's just the way it goes. Fortunately for two men, we didn't have that option. I did read books early on, like baby books, and it talked so much about breastfeeding, and I was like, there's really nothing I can do. Our children are going to be bottle fed. It's just what's going to happen. And so again, early in the discussion, we wanted something that where we both shared equally in the responsibilities. Of course, there's certain things that one of us does better than the other, and so that's you tend to recognize that. And so early on with Carmen, we were trying to arrive at, well, what's an equitable schedule? What's a schedule that would make it fair? And we were both still working somewhat, and so we wanted to have a schedule that would allow us to plan our career, but still something that people could count on. And so we decided on even and odd days, that on even days of the week, that Robert was the primary caregiver for Carmen, and on odd days of the month, I was. And it was nice because it meant it was basically every other day. It meant that if you needed to schedule something with work, if they said, "Are you available next Wednesday?" you could look at the calendar, see if Wednesday was even or odd, and say yes or no, and say, "No, it have to be Thursday." We were talking about this with some of our straight friends, and in particular, some of the dads said, "Don't tell our wives about this." It was something that they really didn't want to be spreading. So we talked about how are we going to do it early on. I think with Carmen we had much stricter schedule. I think with James it was less strict. I think also as for your first child, you're just much more worried, caught up in it all. I mean, panicked about how you're gonna raise a child.
We are sometimes asked who's the man, who's the woman, and I don't think it's even when I look at my straight couple friends, I if the woman cooks, I don't think of that as the woman's job. There's a division of, duties and household chores, but if we don't think of them as gender specific in the first place, then
I
it
think
doesn't
it's
really...
more talent specific.
Yes. Some people are more
We can't let
talented.
him cook, so it's usually me.
But I can eat, so I contribute that way.
I think we might not agree, I'm not sure, but I think it's easier for us as a gay family to negotiate who does what based on who has more time and who's better at it than not falling back on pre-assumed, gender roles as, the woman does this and the man does that. So I definitely think it's easier for us to strike a balance. But the fact is every working parent struggles with balancing their responsibilities and their guilt over not being able to devote themselves fully to their children. I think that's a universal experience, but I do think it's a little bit easier for us not to sort of fall back into that, oh, well, I'm the man, I'm going to focus on this thing, and I'm the woman, I'm going to focus on that. I don't know, what do you think?
I agree for the most part. I think that, and it's the same with other friends, other lesbian and gay families, and friends that we have, that there isn't a natural assumption. There can't be, based on gender roles, because you're both two people of the same gender. So I agree.
So with Ellie, we actually tried to split things fairly evenly. Ian was working as an attorney and I was a graduate student, but Ian was able to arrange to have a half-time leave from work. So we actually literally split the week, and 2 days a week Ian would stay home and be with Ellie while I was working on my dissertation and doing other work, and then 3 days a week Ian would go to work and I would be at home. But like Fridays he would try to do a half day, so we would sort of split that.
Which is a lucky thing, because when Ellie first came home, my office used to be in the World Trade Center on the 85th floor of the North Tower, and it just so happened that on September 11th, 2001, it was one of the days when I was parenting Ellie at home, and so I didn't go to work.
So we say Ellie saved his life.
And we say that Ellie saved my life.
What are the kinds of tools that you can pass on to your children so that they can deal with, growing up in our world? One of them is recognizing that people believe different things and understanding the difference between belief and opinion and fact. And that they should, the fact is that they are growing up in a family with two parents who love them. And we're not perfect, but we're certainly doing our best to raise our children as best as we can. There are people who feel that, that same-sex couples shouldn't raise children. It wasn't that long ago that people felt that, a black person or white person shouldn't get married. It wasn't that long ago that women were told they shouldn't have an education. Society progresses. We're at a point right now where society is continuing to progress.
We don't hide who we are ever, at all.
I mean, it's not always even conscious. Our family clearly stands out. It's very clear to people when we're out in the world that we're a family, that we're a mixed race family, and that we're a family led by two men. And that, we have these little black kids walking around with yarmulkes on, although she's not wearing hers right now. But, I mean, we clearly stand out in our community wherever we go. We're very identifiable as a family, and I don't think we've ever thought about trying to hide that or play it down. I don't think we consciously try to present ourselves as a family to be, but we just stand out a lot, so. It certainly is that there are branches of Judaism, and there are branches that are closed to the notion of gay marriage, and Orthodoxy is largely in that camp. And there are branches that are gay marriage is no problem. Of course, we embrace it. And the Reform and Reconstructionist movements are largely in that camp. We actually find ourselves right in the middle. We're a part of a conservative Jewish movement that is actively debating where they stand on issues of gay marriage and ordination of gay rabbis. And so that's actually a big issue that we're torn with, because we're in this community that is debating within itself how much they want to embrace families like ours, which is actually very hurtful at times. But we're happy that the debate is going on, and we also recognize that although the debate is happening largely in the leadership, an overwhelming majority of conservative Jews are welcoming and accepting of gay and lesbian families and are really wanting their leadership to embrace those families on equal footing.
When being a same-sex couple or being non-traditional in a traditional world makes us work harder to be better because we are looked at with scrutiny. So our children have to look presentable, act presentable, be smart, have manners, everything that another child may be pushed aside. Our children have to raise the bar all the time.
Absolutely.
We have to raise the bar as parents, and then our children end up raising the bar.
I don't see them as being ashamed of us. They're actually proud of being with us. They try to follow whatever I do, especially the little one, Kendrick. If I'm doing something like manly, he's trying to follow what I'm doing, and then he giggles about it. So I think they're okay with it.
Yeah, and the friends also. I guess that since gay community is so open right now, that it's not a surprise, for kids to see two females together or two guys together. So that when my kids come out and said, okay, this is my mother and that's also my mother, so they'd be like, oh, that's all they say. They don't come out and call them names or anything. They try to keep it, okay, you got two mothers, We
always do try to keep open-minded with them. And we do ask them if they have any problem, whatever problems they have to do tell us. If anybody in school is bothering them to do tell us. And so far, nothing.
But when Anthony was, I'd say, a junior in high school, things started getting easier for him. He went did an ambassadorship. It was called Student Ambassadorship, and he went on a tour of Europe. And with 16 children he never met before from all over New York. And he got to be honest with them without worrying. My mother's a lesbian. And he was so excited because it was the first time he was free to say it without having them judge him negatively. And they were like, wow, that's cool.
Wow. I have to think about that one. Have we ever been in a situation where a family was recognized as being, unusual? Have we ever heard any comments or anything like that? Honestly, I can't think of anything with the kids being, roughly the age that they are now. I do remember, again, when Carmen was a baby. So I remember a woman, an older black woman, accused us of stealing a black child, and I remember thinking that, is really sad that that's how she felt. I don't think that had to do with us being two men. I think she would have felt that way if it was a man and a woman. It had to do really about, racial stuff in our country. I think, when I think about it, that's probably where things come up more, rather than it being two dads or two moms. I guess clearly for us it's two dads. I think there's more about race in our society.
When we knew it was safe, for us, when we knew it was safe, we told him it's safe. When it wasn't safe for him, his life and his adjustment was more important than our gayness. So for us, he was always the object of our decision making.
I think also living on Staten Island is very difficult because Staten Island is very racial. It's very homophobic.
Yes.
Oh, beyond a shadow of a doubt, they have, and we've been out here for a while, and there's still parts of this island that you'll never catch me on. I won't go there. Because we've had bottles thrown at us on the expressway when we were driving. We've been called names, and racial. And when you have your child in the car and they hear this, it sends a very strong message.
Well, the word
It does
dyke.
for me. That doesn't even bother me.
No, but when they do it, when he was younger and they
Yeah.
did it in front of
Yeah,
him, that's
but,
still negative.
yeah.
Now he's older, he understands it, but when he was younger, it's
But I think
not appropriate.
but I think the racial part plays a bigger thing, because then that's why there is so much prejudice on this island, and you try not to teach your child, you know, prejudice.
We definitely get looks from people a lot of times, almost wherever we go, just because we are so very different from other families.
But not necessarily negative look.
Right, so just looks,
Curious
just
looks,
curious looks because we're different. Can you think of any particular instance where we've had bad reactions?
Not like with the kids.
Yeah.
You know, maybe when we've walked holding hands somewhere, we'd hear a comment, but not with the kids. I think that we've either had neutral or, you know, maybe people just staring. And there have been a couple of times where Ellie has been conscious of people sort of staring at us. But in part, people stare at us because our kids are so cute. Like, that's the...
Of course.
But yeah, I don't think we've had a lot of whole negative. But I mean, I think we're also selective about where we go. So we chose to live in a community where there are a lot of other gay and lesbian families, where it's a very mixed race community that is very conscious about it. So there are a lot of other mixed race families.
One of the things that, for us, that, I mean, we were certainly wondering about is what it is going to be like for our children to grow up in our society. I mean, we are not the trailblazers. You know, there were certainly, you know, kids that have two moms or two dads long before we came along. But, you know, it's not typical. And, you know, when Carmen was just a baby, at one point, we were riding in an elevator, and she was only, you know, 4 or 5 months old. And there was a man and a woman in the elevator with us, and the man said, you know, oh gee, somebody's babysitting today, and the woman kind of elbowed him because, you know, she knew that we were two parents with a child, you know, and this was not babysitting. So I think the part of the way that we decided to resolve that question for our kids is that we live in Cambridge. And we live in a major urban area, and so while their family structure is not the typical one, it's not uncommon. When Carmen was in daycare, there was another family there with two moms. Actually, there are two other families with two moms. There are other families that were formed through adoption. The fact that, you know, our family is a transracial family. There are lots of things that kind of set our family apart, and because we live in a major area, you know, they're not the only ones. They're not the only black kids in a white family. They're not the only kids with two dads or, you know, or two moms. They're not the only family that was formed through adoption. So I think part of it is that they certainly know that their family structure, you know, not having a mom and a dad, is not the typical one, is not the normal one, but because they've seen other families like theirs, it just means that, oh, well, here's, you know, our family is different, but it's not unheard of.
Part of my developing by learning what it's like to be hated has allowed me to grow above being an American, above being a spouse, above being a mother, and for being part of humanity first. We don't fight for gay rights, we fight for civil rights. These are our civil rights. We go to war as a country for other people's rights, but yet we don't even look at the rights of those people that live in this country. And that's hypocritical as far as I'm concerned. So if I look at myself, I am a human being of the world before I am anything else. And that would make me respect everybody in this room and everybody outside this room.
Well, I think the right has used, you know, meaning the conservatives have used, you know, the gay rights issues and marriage in particular these days as a tool to scare many mainstream Americans. It's unfortunate. There seems to have been some progress, but there's still a lot of homophobia out there, and it's not going to go anyway. It's not going to go away anytime soon. I'm very disappointed with the administration in this way, especially since I do travel abroad. It is embarrassing to point to our current administration and say that this is the best that America has to offer, because I don't believe that's the case. But I'm also glad that I live in a country where I can say that. America is not a bad country, but it is scary how much ignorance is out there.
Most children of gay parents understand what it's like to be looked at as less than. In the country that we live in, the United States, they attack us, but they don't know what they do to our children every time, because we are their parents. Our children love us.
Well, we don't get into politics. We don't get into politics.
We know there's a lot of controversials out there about the gay politics and all that, but right
about
now,
gay marriage.
yeah, we don't really get into that right now.
But we don't get into politics.
We do try to follow it.
We follow it. That talking about gay marriage, I mean, that's an issue that has been a big issue here.
And I know it's gonna happen one day. I mean, eventually
it's gonna happen.
The government is gonna give up and say, you know what, let gay families get married.
But my view of it is like, they should just let us be. They should just let us get married. I mean, it's not like we're committing a crime. We just like the next neighbor, the next person next door. We do everything they do. We work. We're raising our children. Our children could be the future president of the country. You know, it's not difference between us and them. The only difference is our sex, that we chose to have a partner that is the same sex as us. You know, that we work. We pay our taxes. We clean like they clean.
We're doing the same thing everybody else is doing. That's
yes.
it.
What are the benefits for living in a household with two gay men? It's unfortunate. The things that come to mind are all so stereotypical. You know, I wonder if the food's better.
There are so many children out there that are just thinking one way and that's it. Our children are thinking this way, that way, and all other possibilities that are around them. So I think our children have a little bit maybe more knowledge.
Because the thing is that we teach our children not to discriminate. Because teaching our children to discriminate is saying, okay, you can discriminate against us also.
You can't discriminate against that black guy or that white guy or that Chinese guy or that Spanish guy, because then you're discriminating against us.
Because of that, I believe that we raise our kids a little better. I mean, because we give them a little more understanding. Okay, just because one person is a certain way doesn't mean that they're different than us. We all God's children. We all the same, you know. And especially we are Hispanic, and in the Hispanic community, they have a way of thinking that because you are gay and you raise your children are gonna come out gay also, and that is so narrow-minded. That is so not true. Because how many families out there are straight family, heterosexual family, and the kids come out gay? I mean, so, you know, it could go either way. It could be our kids that come out gay, it could be their kids that come out gay. Doesn't mean because who's raising them.
I think part of it is because we're a less typical family. I would hope that there's more of an ease to, you know, we're not so forced to fit into a certain kind of structure, that I hope that our kids feel more free to explore who they are than they might otherwise. I was talking with my niece the other night. I know that, you know, one of the big goals of children is to figure out what is it that will really tick off their parents. You know, what's the thing that I can do as a grown-up that will really, you know, make my parents angry, or at least upset or disappointed, who knows what, but you're guaranteed that your children are not going to follow whatever path you might have in mind. I know that was the case for me and my mom. I'm really worried about what that might be because I can't even imagine it. I keep trying to think, like, what will our children do? Will they become, arch conservatives? Like, what is the thing that our kids could do?
I think that there are benefits to our children for growing up in our family, because I think they landed in the right family for them. And I think we're the best possible parents for them. I think we are able to model standing up to adversity, being true to who we are ourselves as people. Our children who are African American are going to experience discrimination in the world, and we can model ways of dealing with that for them. I think that we can teach them not to accept things without really looking at them critically and understanding them because of our own struggles, to understand our own places in life. So in those ways, I think we have unique things as a gay or lesbian, as a gay family, to offer to our children. But I think every family has unique things to offer their children based on their own experiences. What do you think?
I agree. I think you well said.
So basically, we're the best parents for our children.